Hello CMC, my name's Rebecca Atkinson and I'm the creator of a preschool animation called Mix Mups and also the founder of Toy Like Me, which is an educational and play organisation which celebrates the representation of disabled children in toys and children's industry. So I'm here to talk about the road to Mix Mups, how Mix Mups came about and where it's going, and also offer you some tips, practical tips on how you can better represent disability across children's industries. Begin with the story of Toy Like Me. So in 2015, I had two young children who were 5 and 7, and I just got a guide dog because I'd lost some of my eyesight, and I looked around for toys which represented our family situation, and there just weren't any. And I sort of thought, right, I had a background in journalism. I thought, I'm going to write an article about this. I contacted an editor and I said, I really want to write an article about the lack of representation in toys. And he said, that's great, but you need a news angle, like a campaign. So I looked around for a campaign as a hook for this article, and there wasn't one. So I started one called Toy Like Me. And what happened here was I had this idea that if I put a tiny little pink hearing aid onto a Tinkerbell doll, I wanted to look at what that would look like. And I took a high resolution picture and put it online. And this image just went viral with people saying, I want to buy that, I want to buy that, where do I get that? Oh my God. A lot of emotion was coming back. What I saw was a lot of anecdotal evidence that people were wanting these products, whether there was any academic evidence to support this. So I teamed up with Dr. Sian Jones, who was at Goldsmith University. She was a psychologist, and she was doing a research project which looked at what happens to non-disabled children's attitude towards disabled children after playing with a disabled toy for 3 minutes. And what she found was just 3 minutes of play was causing them to be more likely to make friends with a child with a disability. So at that point I realised, okay, this is really important. This is more than just a toy. This is about creating societal change through children's industries. Through the Toy Like Me campaign, we reached out to toy companies and asked them, please, 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 will you better represent disability in your toys? Although people were starting to create more and more products with disability included in them, they were often falling into the same traps around how they represented. And there's a very, very fine nuance that maybe people won't see, but it's a sort of drip, drip, drip effect that it builds up into a dominant cultural narrative around disability. So one example of that is that 9 out of 12 toy wheelchairs that I found were grey. And grey is a colour that's trying to pull back from the world. It's trying to not be seen. And I think there was an issue there where designers perhaps felt they couldn't play creatively with disability. After the sort of viral success of Toy Like Me, I applied to the Arts Council for a grant to take this concept further. So we created 12 images called Toy Box Tales, and they were mainstream figures that were very recognisable, cultural figures, characters from Frozen, Barbie, Incredible Hulk. And we made them over to give them impairment and disabilities. And Toy Like Me is an arts and play organisation, and we go into schools with these Toy Box Tales images and we start conversations with children about disability, and we're able to reach children on their level through the medium of toys, which they love, and start those sometimes awkward conversations. So as my work progressed, looking at the aesthetics of disability in children's industries, I did a little bit of consultancy work for a well-known toy brand. And what I found happened was that a lot of the same, I guess you can call it unconscious bias, was coming back, or prejudice through design, or stereotype. And those are not anybody's fault, because we all absorb a collective narrative about how we might perceive disability. But what I was seeing was quite frustrating. I'm going to create a TV show which does disability in the way that I think it should be done as a disabled person myself. So behind the scenes of Toy Like Me for 4 years, I have been developing a show called Mix Mups, Mix Mups is a preschool animation. It's aimed at 3 to 5-year-olds, and it's about 3 little friends who are called Pocket, Spin and Giggle. And these little friends have a magic mixable fancy dress box, and they have a wooden spoon, and they mix up the magic inside this fancy dress box, and that transports them on these dress up adventures. These characters, some of whom have disabilities. So we have Giggle, who uses a wheelchair, and Pocket, who has a guide dog called Yapet. And also Giggle has an assistant guinea pig, which is called Roller Guinea. And then we've got Spin and the lucky louver bird, who looks a little bit like an elephant, but is actually a trunky beaked bird. And they live in a helter-skelter house, and they go on these adventures through the portal of their dress-up box. And when they are on the adventures, they meet this lucky louver bird. So how you handle disability representation in children's programmes is about 2 things. One, it's about how your characters look. And then it's also about what is the narrative driver in your show. So from my view, for too long, we have handled disability by using the narrative driver of disability. So we use the disability as the jeopardy in the story. Whereas Mix Mups, basically, I wanted to create a show which would stand up on its own without any disabled characters. All the stories in the Mix Mups series, most of them don't really reference disability. And I think that's really, really important, because disabled children don't only want to be in stories about their disability. You know, that their disability affects their life, but it isn't everything. So one of the big influences for Mix Mups is fancy dress, and wheelchair fancy dress in particular. So this is the phenomena that a lot of children who use wheelchairs will dress up their wheelchairs as a sort of cardboard structure around themselves. And the thing about fancy dress is that you can be anything. Giggle, her chair, sometimes when she transforms into dress up adventures, she's just got her chair as normally. And then sometimes she might have her chair as an ice cream van or a rocket or something like that. So another one of the things about Mix Mups, which is a first, is that the characters with disabilities are the lead characters. They're not the sidekicks. They're not defined by an able-bodied person and their relationship to that able-bodied person. They are the central characters. I just want to tell everybody that you know, change can really happen. 3 or 4 years ago, I was on a panel at the CMC and talking about disability representation, and that is where I met some of the team behind this show. So Debbie McDonald and Alison Rayson from Radar Media, they both have disabled children. Andy Burns, who's our director, he has a child with a disability as well. And we were able to come together at CMC and basically take action in the form of Mix Mups. Although a lot of the team behind Mix Mups do have lived experience parenting children with disabilities, and obviously the team is led by myself, who as a disabled person. We also have lots of people in the team who don't have disabilities. Chris Bowden, who's the producer of Mix Mups from McKinnon and Saunders, is a great example of this. He has been open-minded, willing to learn, and very, very flexible in terms of how we do things. But the way that we've dealt with that is to have lots of open discussion. Nothing's off limits. No questions are off limits. I encourage everybody who's involved in Mix Mups to ask me questions, even if they feel awkward about them. We've had training around the subtleties of wheelchairs and how to work a guide dog. So the idea as well is to raise that level of awareness and help our staff to feel comfortable approaching this, so that they can go on again after Mix Mups to handle disability in new shows and have the confidence to do that. One of the big questions that always comes up, is it possible to make a commercially viable brand that has disabled characters in it? And that has been the aim with Mix Mups, is to see whether we can make a show that's so wonderful and bursting with fun that people want to be involved in that, they want to watch that, and they want to hold those products. And the thing that I come back to is it's not about the characters, it's about the stories. So if you think about Finding Nemo, Nemo has one fin smaller than the other, and there's lots of children who are born with one hand, who call this their lucky fin after Nemo. So Nemo has a resonance with the disabled community, but he's also made a lot of commercial success. So I really think it's about character and it's about story. It's not about disability. You've listened to the story of Toy Like Me and of Mix Mups, and now I want to give you some action now, take home points that you can do if you are thinking of including a disabled character in your show. So the first top tip is to be aware of the very, very fine nuance of representation. So this is the idea that very, very small things can communicate to your audience, and you need to check what they're communicating. So if you look at this slide of 6 wheelchairs, the lines are slightly different in each of them, but they're communicating very different things about disability. From the top slide, where you have quite a passive figure waiting to be pushed, to the bottom right hand image where you have what looks like a child very joyously throwing their hands up in the air. So lines matter, those really small nuances, they do actually matter. The next tip that I would give is to be aware of the collective narrative about disability and where that comes from, so that you can understand where your own unconscious biases come from. The drip, drip, drip effect of what may seem like very small, innocuous points, and how they can build up within culture to form a collective narrative about something. Being aware about your droplet, what droplet are you putting into the collective narrative? Is it the same as everybody else's? Is it building up one big picture, or is your droplet that's being put into the collective narrative different from everybody else's and helping to grow a collective narrative which is multifaceted about the millions of trillions of lives that disabled people have? Although Mix Mups is led by a disabled creative me and the team behind Mix Mups have got disabled children, that doesn't mean that nobody else can handle disability. But the one thing that I would say is get consultation. Knowing about the representation of disability and the fine nuances is a skill in itself. So kind of asking John's neighbour Barbara, who uses a wheelchair, is not enough. They'll give you their audience opinion, that's great, but they might not have the specialism about representation and about these collective narratives and about how all this stuff fits together to inform us and build views about disability. So get consultation. And the other thing is, this is a controversial one, but pay for that consultation. But people don't necessarily want to pay for that expertise. And in that transaction, there is a sense that what I'm saying is not worth paying for, and that's tricky. So for too long, we've not had diverse people telling stories, and so the stories have stayed the same. But really, we need to change the narrators and have a more diverse smorgasbord, if you like, of people who could feed into the media. But the way you do that, it's actually to look at the structural inequalities of the industry, of what's stopping people from getting a foothold and staying in the industry. It's not enough to just get a foothold, you've got to stay in the industry. And then in 20 years' time, that's when the narrative starts to change, because it's a long-term game. We're not going to change it overnight. We've got to invest now in order to change it in 20 years' time. So for me, I was trained 24 years ago. That was my starting point. And really it's paying dividends now because I'm able to create Mix Mups and be the executive producer. I've grown up, basically. If we want to change the narrative, we need to change the narrators. And if we want to change the narrators, we need to change the structure that allows them to get that foothold. Thank you very much for listening to the story of Mix Mups. And if you want to get in touch, then the details are on screen now.